Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Man's Hour 5. I'm joined by three gentlemen of power. We'll go around the panel and quickly introduce everybody before we tackle the topic at hand. Praise of Folly, welcome back to the Man's Hour. How are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Red Hawk.
Awesome. We are also joined by Maven. How are you, sir?
Not bad, thank you very much. It's 3 hours on UO and 1 hour of this, so we're going to hit the 4 hour stream target on a Tuesday.
Well, there you go, man. You're an absolute trooper. Fantastic. And then also welcoming to the show, Clausington. How are you, sir?
It's a pleasure to be here, Red Hawk. I'm just glad that I made it on at such brief notice.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you. So, all right, guys. So we're here to tackle the time-honored question. What do men actually want? So this is obviously like a loaded question, and there'll be tons of different answers and stuff like that. But I think right off the bat, we can quickly go around the panel. I want you guys one thing that immediately you want, let's say, out of the opposite sex in a relationship. We'll start right at the top with Todd. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? One thing.
Well, I was gonna say two people come to mind. The Ted Kaczynski's concept of the power process and Bronze Age perverts' idea of own spaces. So one of the things that men in the modern age don't have is they don't have own spaces and for Ted Kaczynski, the power process is some sort of meaningful activity that you can derive immediate benefit from. So if you work as a slave or as a drone for a corporation, you don't really benefit from that. And so what this means is one of the things this is one of my predictions. We see a lot of guys that asshole or jerk max, especially in management, and I think a lot of that is because they don't have an own space or power process at home over their woman. And because they don't have that, they act out in these ways against other men because it's acceptable to punch down against men.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting idea for sure. I think I want to dissect that a little bit more in a bit here, but let's go to Maven next real quick. One thing, what do men want, Maven?
I think the power process by Ted Kaczynski's is very good. I'd also say, obviously, you want a woman, in particular, someone who can deal with all the domestic bliss, let's say.
Yeah, very much so. That classic peace, quiet, and tranquility, as it were. Closeton, what about you, man? What do you think?
I think men want some sort of dynamic upward mobility, not just in their relationships, but also in their personal, financial, and in property lives. We want things to constantly be getting better and more refined, more. I guess we want things to constantly get better, age better, grow. We want to grow as people. We want to develop gravitas and dignitas, um, but in a very dynamic way where we can make our own mark. Um, just to riff off of Todd's um, power process and own space. We want to create essentially monopolies of our own space out of primordial chaos and be the owners of our own castle, so to speak, and see that realm grow and develop and age like fine wine, and then we can rest on our laurels when we grow older. So I think what is best in life and what men want is dynamic change for the better.
Yeah, I very much tend to agree with that. I think the best way I could sum it up for myself is what a man truly wants at the end of everything is 100% agency over his own life, in the sense of that he's in control of his finances, his career path, his relationship status, whatever that may be. I do think there is something to be said for the fact that at the very core of manliness, it is just having control and freedom to some extent. And I don't necessarily mean freedom in the political terms that we typically use, but just in the way to actually have control over your own life in a fair way, or what we perceive as fair. Hard work, has actual hard work pays off in the sense of you're not getting cheated. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, no man likes to. I mean, that's why we have the gold bricking. No man likes to have his labor cheated and skimmed off. And just for anybody that isn't in the know, gold bricking is where you appear to work when you're not actually working. The other thing men don't like is pointless work that is clearly not only not to their benefit, but doesn't even make sense. And that's been one of the long-term. I mean, that's why we have the Dilbert cartoon strip. Corporate America is just a bunch of nonsense work piled upon nonsense work. And of course, it's great satire because it's true.
Yeah, very much so. I forget the study that came out, but wasn't it something to the effect of that the average like corporate days worth of work is actually only like 2 hours worth of actual working and then 6 hours of basically nothing?
There was a good, I mean, I think it was either an Atlantic or New York Times article, but it became a book. It was called Bullshit Jobs on the various types of jobs that are either redundant, pointless, or a general waste of time, considered a waste of time by the people actually doing those jobs. And I don't know what the statistic is, but a very significant part of corporate America, both the private and the government sectors, is made up of stamp collecting, toady. I forget what the categories are, but a significant portion of corporate America and government America is just pointless work. And it's soul crushing. It's a drain on the economy. No one really likes it. So why do we actually have them? Well, we're not here to actually answer these questions. We're here to say that these are bullshit. And what men actually want is to find a meaningful trade where they actually do have agency. I don't think that they necessarily want autonomy, because you can find agency within a group or within your tribe that you feel camaraderie with, not necessarily one that you're pressed into, or one that you or an absolute free agent that you just happen upon, but an agent within a greater system, I'd say.
I'd go even further than that and say most men want to follow a good leader. So it's not even the group. They want to follow a particular individual which they think can help them exceed.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with that as well. Just a general sense of purpose. Whether that is following someone greater than yourself. I mean, men are inherently hierarchical, so it's definitely part of our machine to follow somebody above us. But I think there's just something to understand that you are a cog in something greater. The great chain of being, as everyone likes to say.
Yeah. The other thing too is, as far as a professional career, another thing that men want is whatever skills and talents they have, they want to be employed in a way that they use those skills and talents. Because one of the problems that I've run into is because of two things. One is the sort of accreditation system, which is, controlled by Zog to just make sure that wrongthink doesn't get involved in academia or in any sort of teaching or reporting. I wasn't able to, get a career where my expertise would actually get me ahead, because I would, and also there's a lot of this financial bullshit you have to do to monetize yourself before you can do what you really want. And what those two things do is it means there isn't a connection between the people that can do the jobs and that want to do the jobs, and then them getting it, because these intermediate hurdles are just thrown in the way to break you down before you get there. And there's no sense of, there's nothing like, say, the Imperial Chinese exam, where every year they have an exam and they give it to everybody in the country. And it's like, well, okay, you passed the exam, you can join the imperial bureaucracy now. That was a real meritocracy, but, we don't have that anymore.
Yeah, all the artificial barriers to entry, that HR departments and God knows what other, paused BS is now put inside businesses. The classic meme of bachelor's required, master's preferred, for a basic job that anyone could have done with a high school degree and 2 years of actual training from any business in America. but because it's all run by, incompetent boomers, they just need to outsource their thinking. And God forbid anyone trains anyone to do a job these days.
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
that more of a stamp collecting or quality control?
Oh, that's quality control, totally. Because when I was going to college, in the Audis, this was like peak war on men, and so they were definitely filtering out men that didn't play ball.
It's not even just that. I mean, my master's degree was unrelated to my undergraduate, and I could have probably done my master's degree straight from school, just based on the knowledge and skills I had then. You can just skip so much if you actually know what you're doing. And on the work thing as well, you mentioned where all these nonsense jobs. I started at a new company recently, and I had a meeting the other day. I presented some work I did, and one of the people in the meeting says your predecessor took 3 months to complete the same sort of thing, which took me 6 days. So if you know what you're doing, you can just excel. And most people are just wasting their time.
That word excel is the bane of my existence. Just about every profession is kept afloat by Microsoft Excel, to one degree or another. It's and
yeah, I
there's
didn't
something
mean it
dehumanizing about
in that
the
way. Maybe it was
spreadsheet,
thinking about
but-
work made me think about the.
But getting back to the theme of autonomy, how autonomous are you in manipulating data on a PowerPoint or on an Excel spreadsheet? Unless you are a very talented statistician, there are a lot of just data monkeys out there and data monkey jobs. You have to learn the ropes of what kind of rules you have to manage and what kind of data you need to input. But there are a lot of data monkey jobs that are completely dehumanizing that I'm sure this panel will frown upon, but they're very common out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to think about how much of these busy work, make work jobs are just they have to be put in there because of the economic conditions of all of our societies basically, and it really opens the idea of how much better and how many more interesting things and how much more time could men spend with their kids and things like this if they weren't forced by the bureaucracy to spend 8 hours a day at these worthless jobs. I mean, just think about how here's an example. Basically, so many of these jobs people could have just worked from home for the last 20 years, but it took a worldwide pandemic of the coof to actually finally put it in people's heads that people can use this thing called the internet to work at their homes. And I've actually got a buddy right now who took on not one but two extra jobs during the COVID stuff, full-time jobs, because he was only doing like 2 hours worth of work at each job, and he just tripled his income because he just had nothing else to do with his time. So I think that's a very interesting thought experiment.
I think one reason why we have a proliferation of bullshit jobs is we doubled the workforce by bringing women into the workforce, and they couldn't actually do the work that men were doing. So they just gave them all. That's why they staff HR with them. They give them all the bullshit jobs because they have to go somewhere. But we didn't actually produce more jobs to give them. That's the problem.
Right, and the jobs which women used to do, such as secretarial work, used to be all about supporting the productive jobs which men used to do. Right, so you still get secretarial work in a few niche industries. High performance lawyers are one of them, where the lawyers will spend the entirety of their time dealing with actual legal work which uses your brain. And then they've got only secretaries to do the printing, the scanning, the copying, sending the emails, looking at the schedule, all these things which take a lot of time for a normal office employee. They just outsource to some random woman, right? And that frees them up to deal with a lot more, more economically beneficial work, right? But also, it's the power thing you talked about. They can get that instantly because they can just say, you deal with all this nonsense, I'm dealing with the important stuff. So we've moved from an economy which focused on that. Even draftsmen in some engineering workshop would have access to this sort of help. And now, only the elite of the elite do.
Yeah, I think there's also something to be said for, I mean, Jordan Peterson calls it the lost boys, like the purposelessness among men. And I think there's definitely something to be said for you actually having a trade, working with your hands, can actually see actionably that your work is, doing something in the world, as opposed to just being stuck at the corner cubicle, typing away, not looking at the sun, not working with your hands. You don't really feel like you're a part of something.
Yeah, I think that's also a failure of leadership. You can make people feel like they're part of something if you set out your vision properly. You get people involved and actually to feel like what they're doing, even if it's just data monkey nonsense on Excel. If you got a good team leader and a proper leadership from the vision, then you can actually feel that your work is not useless. But as we've moved away from proper hierarchy and telling people, when men used to tell men what to do and it would be respected, then that's just gone away.
Like, to what extent are these jobs self-selecting? Like, I'm thinking of in terms of like, if you actually want to do like a nice blue collar work job, like, what is taking the average like high school age guy to go right into the trades rather than like rack up debt with a useless degree?
Well, with regards to that, one of the problems is about 20 years ago when this process got started, there was actually a lot of money to be made. Well, actually, probably going back to the 80s in doing this computer economy, right? But then the corporations decided to flood the market with midwits, which then crashed the actual value of any one programmer, so that they're well, if you were the first one in, you could make a killing and then retire with a ton of money. If you come in like in 2005, it's a much more competitive market. The unit value of the worker, even though it's skilled labor, is a lot less than it would have been in 1985. And I think the other thing is with the trades, this is a part of a broader American collective infrastructure, right? The American Army Corps of Engineers says that the U.S. infrastructure is like a D minus, and
That's not the Army Corps. That's the American Society of
civil
Civil
engineers,
Engineers.
right?
Yeah,
Civil engineers, and
that's just for a few criteria. We're actually doing pretty well in terms of airports and waterways. What we're really not good at is upkeeping government roads and was it? I think we're not good at ports. I think that's what the report said.
well, also we're not good with the infrastructure for energy. A lot of the
Oh, that's
California
awful.
a lot of the forest fires in California were from transformers that were shorting out because they were like almost 100 years old and they never. So part of the problem is there's been this big war on the infrastructure or neglect of the infrastructure, and a lot of those trade jobs would have been historically to maintain and upkeep that infrastructure. And the other thing is, and this is a problem across all fields. So, for example, back in the day, let's go back to like a Native American teaching his son how to hunt with a bow. If you were a good bowman, and you weren't going to keep that as a trade secret so that your kids didn't learn how to hunt buffalo. No, you're going to teach them, and you're going to teach them for free because it's your duty as a father to do so. But a lot of these people they end up competing against their own children and the next generation, and saying, "Well, I have all these skills as a tradesman, but I'm not going to give them to you because you might take my job away." And so it creates this disconnect of transferring knowledge from one generation to the next.
I don't think that's the actual. I don't think that's what the actual incentives are. Like I really have never heard that logic expressed by a parent. I think child labor in the developed world is effectively useless due to the glut of or child labor is not very useful in the corporate world as it once was. It's incredibly easy to use child labor on a farm or sometimes in a factory, but in an office environment, I can't see it being marginally much better or marginally worth it for a company to hire kids, which leads to high schools that are effectively daycare centers.
Yeah, they're babysitting operations by and large.
Yeah. I don't think it's intergenerational conflict. I think child labor is just more or less useless for everything except working fast food and in the service industry.
Well,
Well,
I think the other issue is that people for 3 generations now have just been completely fed nonsense all across the board. They've all been given bad information. Everyone, from the Gen X and the Boomers that were raising millennials, telling them all to go to college, follow your heart and money will follow, kind of deal. And all of them are, riddled with student loan debt, and Gen Z isn't looking much better either with this kind of stuff. So it's basically like the blind leading the blind at this point.
I think there is an element of the intergenerational conflicts being talked about. The area where I live in it's one of the few places where there's still quite a few factories. Many of my friends work in manual trades, and so I'm fairly familiar with this. And it's not really a parent to child intergenerational conflict, but what it is where you have people in their 40s and 50s, and they've got this very skilled work, and they know they're good at it, and they maybe got a union lock and pay for or something, and they don't want to train up on these 20-something-year-olds, because then they're directly competing against one of the few ways that they can still make money with their craft.
Well, the other thing too I want to add is, something that Academic Agent is fond of making reference to is declared preferences and revealed preferences. So to your point, Clossington, of course, no parent is going to declare that they want to kneecap their kids. But look at what they do. They put everything behind a paywall so that you can't, because if you're a kid, you don't have money. That's the problem. You need to get the money, and you need skills to get the money. But if the skills are behind a paywall, you don't get the skills. And so, whereas in a traditional society, they knew that they'd have to train up replacements gratis because the tribe wouldn't be able to survive unless the next generation was taught how to hunt, fish, or make handcrafts.
I think I was more or less just bucking at the example you used of a father and son, like a father not teaching his son to trade. But I think you're right on that. What I will say is a little bit off though is that we're not spending as much as we used to on infrastructure per GDP. We're actually just about steady, but our infrastructure is falling apart. I discussed this issue on Radical Liberation stream a few months ago. We basically built all of our highway and road infrastructure in the 60s, and concrete has a shelf life of about 60 years. So we're going to need a whole lot of infrastructure, blue collar work in the next few decades, regardless.
Well, I'm sure all the Gen Z and millennials that are coming up in the game right now will lecture everyone about diversity, and we'll be lining up to pour the concrete on our road system throughout the country. So I'm sure we are in very good hands.
One thing that I think is very important for what men want, which I haven't really seen a lot of people even on the right talk about, is the importance and necessity of male fraternal relationships. So, for example, we can think of Achilles and Patroclus from the Iliad, or Alexander and Hephaestion from his own histories, or David and Jonathan from the Bible, and in fiction, people like Frodo and Sam. And one of the things that's happened is there's been a multi-front attack on these kinds of male relationships. So one attack is discrimination. You can't have all male clubs anymore because you can have all female, you can have all black, but you can't have all male, right? So that's one. So it's a little hard to organize with your clubs and fraternities if you can't have all male spaces. The other thing is, as I'm sure everybody here is aware, women make unreasonable demands of their men for time as a means to control them so that they don't have the time to maintain and cultivate relationships with their men. Businesses do the same thing. So career eats up your time. I mean, a good example of that is the song Cats in the Cradle, where the guy never has time for his son. And then also the gay panic. Straight men don't want to be perceived as gay. All of those together led to this decline of male bonds and fraternities, which throughout almost all of human history was one of the pleasures of being a man. And one of the reasons why it was targeted, I believe, is because those kinds of communities that could threaten any sort of tyrannical power structure. Aristotle points out in the Politics that tyrants empower women and slaves to control their menfolk, speak so that, because the women and slaves aren't going to rise up, and the menfolk will be too afraid to, because individually they'll be snitched on and taken by the tyrant. And I think that's what men want is a fraternity, a group of other men that they can have long relationships with and have build each other up, and we don't really have that anymore.
Yeah, it's 100% true. It is of utmost importance for any man to have a tribe of other guys that are think like-minded to yourself, and that you could share your your issues with, your successes with, and just have a good time. Because anytime a woman enters into the space, the dynamic will automatically change. And it's not even the woman's fault. It's just the fact that men's sex drive is 10 times higher than that of women. So anytime, a woman comes into the space, there's always going to be a guy who's going to try and, AMOG, alpha male of group. And it's so vital to have those male spaces. Also for the simple fact that women aren't equipped to deal with male problems. We live completely separate lives, basically. There's separate standards for men as there are for women. And quite frankly, women just do not understand the same kind of issues. You need guys in your corner to help you with times of need and stuff like that, for sure.
There is something to the old adage that you're born with a father, or you're born with your first father, and then you get to choose your second father to apprentice under. In terms of getting reared in an actual trade or career, you need to find someone to actually bring you up and give you purpose. You have to accept it yourself, but you also have to accept being given certain knowledge as a trade. Like Todd mentioned, like the sort of the perversion of this by the sort of gay panic, but mentorship is very hard to come by these days. And to develop into an actual man, you need a mentor.
Very much so. I very much agree with that.
I would go completely insane if my mentor was like some naggy middle-aged woman. I just could not do it.
Yeah, it'd be unbearable. And Iron Duke was saying in the chat earlier that he would not respect a female boss, and I tend to 100% agree with that.
I've had almost exclusively female bosses in my career. It's been amusing.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can morph this conversation a little bit more into the relationship and sexual side of things as well. So as it comes to relationships and mate selection and stuff like that, what do men want on that front? We've been talking a lot about agency and career and stuff like that, but one of the other major parts of any man's life is mate selection. So the floor is open, gents.
I'd say don't break rank. So the idea is that in the hierarchical relationship of the family, the woman is of a subordinate rank. And the problem of our age is women breaking rank. And, we see this all the time, because one of the things that's been annoying me on Twitter is a lot of the simping by people on the right spaces. And they'll be like, well, she's at 9, but X. And X is usually something revolving around breaking rank. And that immediately plummets to a 3 or less.
Yeah, I do have a issue a little bit with like, this kind of gets into like the, tomboy abs and anime stuff that we tackled, sometime last year and stuff like that. I do, I understand it's like part of like right wing, frog Twitter culture and stuff like that, like the anime and everything like that. And the worshiping of the female to some extent. I personally just don't get it, and I do take issues with it to some extent, but also I understand it as part of the right wing internet memes and things like that. So what do you guys think?
It's part of the internet memes because they're lonely men. It's if you have some degree of female attention in your life, you just won't simp. You just won't, because you've already got it elsewhere.
Like I think there's some sort of balance to be struck where you don't want to be like a sexless monk or like an online monk who says, don't make eye contact with women before marriage, or shames every or it involves just general prudery or shamefulness. But on the other hand, there's a general proliferation of Coomers, as shown by the anime question.
Yeah, very much so.
Which is much more like it's all beta attitude all around. So how exactly do we like thread this issue by issue? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting balance because then you can definitely, overcorrect into some areas. I mean, my mind goes to people like in the America First crowd where, they're just lecturing people about, talking to women is, pathetic and weak and stuff like that. And that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, as a man, like, it's perfectly acceptable to, like big-breasted women and stuff like that, and take a picture and take a look at a nice blonde and something like that. There definitely is a problem. The way I see it, though, when people are constantly making memes and talking about, Ben Shapiro's sister's big tits, mommy milkers, all that stuff.
Yeah, every now and then it's fine, I'm sure. But I agree. There's definitely some people who take it way too far, including some high-profile people who are always reposting some of these anime accounts.
I can only imagine Academic Agent wasn't thrilled with your take, Red Hawk.
Yeah, well, I got plenty of ones that have pissed people off. But I think on the question of mate selection and everything like that, what do men want, basically? Well, obviously, the number one thing that men look for, and this is just, the fact of the matter, the straight brass tacks of it, the first thing that men look for is attractiveness, is looks in women. It's the number one thing. It's an absolute requirement. Looks get you in the door. And then, it doesn't matter how, successful the woman is in her career or how sweet she is or anything like that. Your looks absolutely trump everything. And that is just straight fact of life. And that's never going to change.
Yeah, it's I think it's looks number one, virtue number two, and everything else is like number 5 or 6.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so let's say you get the looks part taken care of. What are some of the things you look for afterwards, fellas? What's some of the other things that men want? So we got an attractive girl. What else does she need to do to get in the good graces of men?
Excellent question. I can say it's easier to say the things which I'm put off by. That's much easier than what I actually prefer. So my most recent ex, for instance, she had a reasonable size Instagram account. And what always pissed me off was we'd go out for a meal or go out somewhere nice, and it's like, right, let me take 10 photos, let me post on Instagram, do them all up on them with all the filters. And then on the way back, you're looking at she's looking through all the comments, dealing with all of her simps, and it's like, I don't want that in my life. Just fuck off. If I'm in a relationship with someone, I don't want them to be always spending their time dealing with this external presence and this Lady Shot says I would have walked out. Well, I did eventually, but she was very hot. But
in such cases.
Yeah, exactly. But so you want someone that's actually going to focus on you in the relationship as a start, and a lot of women don't even want that these days.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite boundaries to enforce on a first date. Whenever I'm with a girl, the first time she pulls out her phone, I just tell her, put it away, you're with me. And if it becomes a problem with her right then and there, I just know it's not going to work. And you can pretty much just, cut it off right there at the start. But it's an easy test, and an early frame announcement as well. So it's a good tip for you guys to do.
One thing is actual domestic skills, because ultimately what ends up happening is the home, nobody takes care of the home, because either the woman is working, or if the man makes enough that she doesn't work, she just wastes time on social media. Like, to actually have real domestic skills to raise children, cook food, all that stuff would be essential.
Yeah, very much so. All guys like a woman that makes his life easier. If you're part of his mission and make his time, more effective, so he can get back to what he's doing best. So whether it's the domestic skills of cooking, cleaning, child rearing, anything like that, to make my life easier is fantastic. One of my main plates I was working with not too long ago, one of the first things she did, she stayed over the first time, and then the next morning she cooked breakfast, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's pretty good." So that definitely put her in my good graces right away.
I think okay. So right now we have domestic skills, ability to separate themselves from social media, and then I've seen in the comments a few times mentioned uh, women who are obsessed with climbing the career ladder, or I guess mismatched priorities or red flag. So bookishness, or almost obsessive compulsive conscientiousness when it comes to a career and prioritizing career over everything else, and also transactionalism. Too many times I've seen it that they want they're trying to actively rip you off.
Oh yeah, there's a lot
Or
of
take you
that.
for a ride. You pay for everything, you do everything, and then they just focus on their careers independently. So I guess strict independence is a no-go.
Yeah, back on what men want. Men want to be the hero. They want to be the guy that goes and slays the dragon and saves the damsel in distress. And if the woman doesn't need the man but just wants the man, there's definitely a lack of purpose there. And what guy doesn't want to be the hero in his own story? So it's definitely a problem if a chick is hyper career focused, and I don't need no man, but I want a man. It's like, well, kind of an imbalance there.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I went on a date with this French lady early this year. Pretty attractive, very good conversation. Then it got to what do you actually want in the relationship, and she was like, "Well, I don't know if I want kids yet. I spend all my time on this career." I was like, "Well, it's just not going to work, is it?" If you, especially your late 20s, and you don't know if you even want children yet. It was many such cases of that as well.
Yeah, so I guess I think with a lot of women there's a sort of stated versus revealed preference where like as soon as they get with you, they'll adopt whatever your priorities are.
That's absolutely true.
This is true. Like their politics will change with you.
Yeah, to an
In the
extent.
long run, but there are some that are just sort of ruined out of college, that are just red flags all over.
Yeah, that's very true. I would call like most women, particularly young ones, they're just default everything. And that comes down to, default career, default on politics, default on pretty much everything because they haven't been influenced by, somebody else basically to tell them what to think. And that's going to sound misogynistic, but it's basically all female thinking. It's just adopting previous thoughts that have been put in their head by somebody else. So if you can be the strong masculine guy in her presence, she'll more or less just pick up on what you want to do. I mean, I've dated girls that are full blown outright feminists, and then I got them knitting at certain points in the relationship. So it's a process, and it's basically up to your own discretion as to how much work you want to put into that. But it's definitely something you could work on. So I would caution guys that just immediately look for everything as a red flag and immediately write off any girl because basically all of them are default leftists. But you can mold them, guys. Women are they adapt to man, and they've done that since the beginning of time.
Here's something that you can't really change. You can't change if they're not. They can't really change that much if they're not interesting to begin with, or if they have default interests without any sort of involved hobby on their own. Like if they don't have anything outside of like social media or default thing or shopping, you're in for a ride, and it's not a particularly fun one. It's more just boring. So being able to engage with them, or them actually having interests, I'd say matters a lot.
The other thing is these aren't practical skills, but they're skills that are aesthetically, pleasing, being able to play an instrument or sing or do something with art that could help the home look better.
Yeah, very much so. I think one of the things that is a popular theme throughout this whole discussion we've been having for the last 15 minutes or so is basically coachability or compliance, some might say. Like, are you malleable? Are you open to respecting male authority? Are you a follower? Things like this are very attractive to men. Looking for in women. Again, like this feminist lie of that men really like the strong, independent boss babe kind of woman who can hold her own and make all of her own money by themselves is complete bullshit. It's an absolute lie.
Yeah, men don't really care how much money the woman can make, as long as they can do all the wifely duties.
Yep, pretty much. Here's another. This is definitely going to be controversial in our circles as well. But I'm firmly in the camp and believe that if your relationship is sexless, then there's no point in having one. I think, especially for men, that having a sexless relationship is just an absolutely no-go all across the board. I know that's going to be an issue for some people saying, oh, premarital sex and stuff like that. But at that point, if you're, really serious and you're really committed, then you're basically, just roommates at that point. Sex is truly what separates, a relationship from anything else.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a point more in America with your religious sensibilities in terms of like that being controversial. In Europe, that's a just fully accepted opinion.
Yeah, so from the religious point of view, I would modify that and say that the marriage, if it's sexless, there's no point. And yeah, there is those religious pre-commitments. You might see some of this as well, like in Eastern Europe, where religion tends to be a bit stronger than, say, in Western Europe.
No, East definitely not.
No, huh? So the communist legacy lives on.
Oh, very much.
Yeah, I know guys in the Czech Republic and Poland, and the women are certainly getting on there for sure.
So within the
an Eastern European woman, definitely.
So within the confines of however we define as a meaningful relationship, with or without marriage, preferably with or within, sexlessness is there's no point in having it. It's like there's like I totally agree with you guys. It's not worth it. Selling your soul and then having the only sexual thrill in life being, we closed the deal for the company. Oh, my dick gets a little bit hard. Great, fantastic. Or compensating with like hobbies or guns or something like that. You see this being like this sort of boomer cope. Investing in like high tea stuff to get away from the nagging wife or to feel like more of a man. So yeah, there's like if you're in a sexless relationship, it's castrating.
Yeah, very much so.
Also, just to riff off that real quick, Glossington, that's why you have so many of these asshole bosses in management. They're clearly acting out their suppressed anger at not having sex at home by lording it over the workers and trying to run them down. Because there's just it's so obvious that that's what's motivating them.
Yeah, I've met a number of men that are similar to that. So even if they're not trying to run the workers down, the fact that they have no authority at home clearly negatively impacts their work, right? And how they manage their team. It's sad to see.
Yeah, it's definitely entirely possible for sure. I know there's a statistic that came out that even in Christian households, it's something like 60% of men in Christian marriages are addicted to internet porn. So even in like the Christian households, there's a lot of sexlessness going on, and that is just a complete non-starter for any guy, as far as I'm concerned. It's the number one thing that men look for, in a relationship. The entire economy runs on the male sex drive. It's what gets guys up in the morning, by and large, is to go out and produce something so then they can woo a woman for the chance of having sex. And this is something that women really, really don't like to hear, but it's just the brass tacks of things.
I think part of this is the fact that both men and women are just so fat and unattractive these days.
Yeah, that too.
You know, if you're going to have sex on a regular, you want to be physically attracted. So then when you actually, turn over in the bed, it gets you on. And if they're a bit of a lamb whale, that's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah.
Or vice versa for the man. So. If you're an ugly man, then you're not going to get laid.
Yeah, very much so. I'm sick and tired of looking at fat, obese people throughout America. No, it's getting very infuriating. I mean,
well, maybe you need to move to Colorado, Red Hog. That's the fittest state in the union.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention that because I did look up those stats recently. I mean, I was out in Utah and Arizona when I was out in Vegas and stuff like that, and people were definitely more pleasant and stuff like that, and definitely more aesthetically pleasing. So, I've been thinking for some time to set up a Southern Command somewhere down south to get away from these awful winters. So it might be something in my future. What are a couple other things that we're looking for? So obviously we were mentioning domestic skills and stuff like that. I think another thing that this is just a personal thing for me. I really, really enjoy and really, really like, and it's difficult to find these days, especially in the younger chicks, when a woman understands that a man needs time to himself and needs to be alone. I think Patrice O'Neal made this old joke that men want to be by themselves, but they don't want to be alone. in the sense of they want to have the woman in the background and know that she's not gone, but at the same time, a guy just needs to relax, be by himself, be working in his garage, doing something, and just not dealing with any feminine nonsense or any other bullshit throughout the world. I think alone time, stoicism, I guess some would call it, is also really, really important for guys.
Yep, I definitely agree. It's a good test when you've had when you're dating a woman, and what happens when you try and send them away in the morning. Because lots of women will try and stick around, and it's just like, no, sorry, this is my time now. Disappear. What happens? How they react to that is always a good test.
Like I'd say that there's a little bit of a caveat there, because what you don't want to have are man caves where the guy just kind of sits by himself with his like little sports ball shrine, or plays video games by himself for X amount of hours, and that's all he's got going for him. Let's just say it's like meaningful time away, right? With the guy friends, doing something constructive, because there are a lot of ways of wasting your time away from the wife.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you there's times where you just want to be literally alone. You just go for a walk in the woods, or sit and meditate on your thoughts. It doesn't have to be in some consumerist activity or even productive activity. Just there is a time where you need to be away.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just trying to warn us away from the boomer trap.
Yes.
Yeah. You definitely don't want to be, sectioned off in one corner of your house, and this is the only area that you are, allowed to have as your own private space and stuff like that. But Closeton is absolutely correct that you definitely do need to have other things going on outside of, of your home. Some kind of activity that you do, whether it is, shooting or fishing or, whatever it might be. It definitely is important to have other things going on, have a personality, have hobbies, stuff like that.
Now, obviously, in this modern age, it's going to be more difficult to achieve. But one of the reasons why the rest of society is collapsing is in part because of the inordinate amount of time that men have to spend on just this question. 200 years ago, this wasn't very difficult for most men to solve. It was really, the ball was in the man's court if he didn't end up with a wife and children sometime in his 30s. But that's not possible now. And it's not possible even after marriage to guarantee that. And so what men want is they don't want to have to be constantly dealing with this bullshit all the time. Once you get it done the first time, it stays done. And then you can devote your energy to something else, like maintaining society.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting thought there, for sure. You definitely have to. You got to keep yourself grounded, and you got to keep yourself doing things. Like when what do they say, that idle hands are the devil's plaything, and it's definitely very, very true. I was actually having an argument on Twitter earlier this week about this as well. The porn question came up, and while we all agree that pornography is a big problem, I argued that the biggest problem with it is not that it exists, but the fact that men are so lazy and have nothing else going on, that's something that you can spend an exuberant amount of time on. Like if you were out actually busy working or actually meeting women in the real world, porn wouldn't be as much of a problem as it actually is.
Chimp in state of nature,
Yeah, the old BAP quote, yeah, for sure.
No, that's certainly true. I mean, if you're busy all day, you're not going to. Some of these porn addicts will be viewing the material several times a day. You just can't do that if you're busy.
But you see, this is one of the catch-22s of material prosperity, though. It reduces the hours you need to work. And since machines work instead of people, and machines can replace people, you end up having even the people that do work. In some sense, there's less total work for them to do because of what's been displaced by the material prosperity, which of course created this problem in the first place.
Yeah, I do wonder though. Some of these reports of the feudal system, for instance, has people working a relatively similar number of hours to what we do today, when you take into account all their free time throughout the year and on these holidays. Of course, they would have hooked up with hooked up men and women at a much younger age, so they probably spend their time not on porn but proper fornication. But I think the people being really busy with their jobs only really started in the Industrial Revolution and onwards.
Well, and the other thing too is a man shouldn't have to be working all the time. There should be these sort of what I call like informal social activities. Like, so for example, in these more traditional societies, you were able to have what's loosely called the Männerbund, and we discussed the death of that. Reading literature, listening to music. I mean, part of the problem is concerts are under attack with the woke, where completely incompetent and unqualified people are being put into orchestras, which are so the very outlets by which we could enjoy culture are being destroyed. And if they don't exist, you can't. I mean, you can still appreciate fine culture to a degree, but it's much harder when the venues are being destroyed like that.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a whole separate stream really talking about the problems in the destruction of culture and art.
Yeah, very much so. So we've got a couple minutes left here, and basically we've covered what men are looking for. We want a purpose in our work. We want male friends, male communities to deal with male problems where we can just shoot the shit and organize and get things done. We want thin, attractive, and compliant women with lots of great sex and home full of children and stuff like that. And that's pretty much what we covered here. What else are we missing? Are we missing anything else?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
no. Well, we did miss the really important question: religion. Men have nothing to live for right now beyond themselves because of the war on religion, and we see that you can't actually fill religion with something other than a religion, and you could argue that the woke is a new religion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've said this on multiple other streams before. I find that men come to spirituality and religion largely later in life, after they've established, the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and they can actually, spend more time to thinking about these, existential questions. When you contrast that with women who can largely, especially in, ancient times and stuff like that, when typically they weren't out working, they were being cared for by men and stuff like that. Women have more time to think about these kinds of things. This is why women are attracted to like things like astrology and stuff like that. Like they actually have the time to think about these kinds of things when men are actually outside, working and making something for themselves and providing value in some way. So I generally think that religion thought mostly comes later in life for men.
Well,
I'd say
I would
that-
just say,
I'm
I
sorry.
was just going to say
Go
that
ahead.
depends on the context, right? So if throughout much of ancient societies, of course, you had a leisure class of the priesthood, which was able to devote their entire lives to this. But also, depending on the level of religiosity in a society, young people are going to be introduced very early on and inculcated with the rites and rituals of their religion. Now, I think what you're saying is true of the modern West, but that's because all those institutions have broken down, and by and large, churches have turned against men as well. But I don't think that's necessarily true across time or in normal societies.
I would say that that the larger point is that there has been a death of civil society, and its main structure being the church and religion, but also um, if you think about like the main organizations that people go to attend that are not the home and not the workplace, where else do people actually go to? It's the community church, but it's also your hunting clubs, your fishing clubs, your like Lions International, Rotary clubs, any sort of charity work, any sort of fraternal organization. Like these things are dying out, unfortunately. Like these more these more how do you say, like, not online, these in-person organizations are dying out, civil society is dying out and being replaced with essentially these consumer brand identities and consumer brand fandoms that are a simulacrum of actual civil society. What men need is actual real in-person civil society, and its main pillar is religion, but there's a lot more to it there.
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, this is a theme many people in our community are constantly touching about the, the ashes, as we call it. Pretty much everything has completely broken down. As it relates to the individual, as it relates to, the society, organizations, everything. And it's going to require men to get together and organize again to rebuild these institutions basically from the ground up. So we've got our work cut out for us here. We're running out of time here, fellas, so we'll do a last minute shilling here. We'll go around the panel. Anyone? Todd, go first. What do you got coming up, man?
Yeah, well, check me out at the Praise of Folly podcast. Check out my locals as well. So regular programming will generally be on Wednesdays. Logos and I, a regular on my channel, are going through selected readings of the Church Fathers. And on Fridays, generally alternating Fridays, will be either the Roundtable and this week, which will be the History of Warfare series. Though on my next Roundtable, I'll be talking about how we got here with China and all the disasters made by U.S. policy down to this point, with the Prudentialists as a guest. So stay tuned for that.
Cool. Awesome stuff. Maven, what do you got?
So I'm running the Witten at the end of August in the UK. So you can, if you follow me on Twitter, you can get lots of links to that. Closington, just here, will be one of the speakers. We also got Academic Agent, Carl Benjamin, Curtis Yarvin, many other people. So make sure to check that out. And I tweet many things as well. So it's always entertaining.
Yeah, cool. You're a fun follow on Twitter for sure. And the American event that we had earlier this year in February was fantastic, and I've heard nothing but sterling reviews of the UK event as well. So everyone be sure to go. Closeton, what do you got?
The only thing I really have on my plate is the Witten event. that Maven so graciously shilled. It's going to be a great time, guys. Go buy tickets while you can. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Awesome stuff. Last bit of shilling I'll do for myself. I've been traveling the last 3 or 4 weeks throughout all of July, so I'm going to get back onto actual regular streaming schedule here. Still trying to figure out what the best day is to have a man's hour, so that'll be working on here. I'll be doing probably Tales of the Game next week with Judicialist. We'll probably come back and tackle some more Marriage Red Pill stuff, so be on the lookout for that. I'm also going to start posting more content on Substack as well. Now I'm getting back into it, so be on the lookout for that. And as always, follow me on Twitter. So with that, thanks for coming on, guys. Be well to everyone in the chat, and we'll see you next time.
Great. See you guys.